Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Travel. My name is Gary Arndt, coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, fresh from the Adventure Travel World Summit in Anchorage, Alaska, where I got to see glaciers and walk on glaciers and have drinks with glacial ice and a whole bunch of other glacier-related activities. With me again, as usual, is the man so nice they named him twice, Mr. Chris Christensen. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. I have been just here, though. I got nothing.
Well, that's great.
It's kind of like a staycation, except the part where you just work. Do we have a word for that?
A workation. That doesn't make for the best podcasting, but we'll work with it. Also here, the giggle you hear in the background is, of course, Jen Leo. How are you doing, Jen?
Great. Hey, everybody. Nice to see you all again.
And our guest this week, we don't need no stinking guests.
It's hard enough to get us together. We're the guests.
It was one of those things where Gary's actually in town for a day. And if we couldn't find a guest, we could put it off for like 2 weeks until Gary and I meet up again in Manila in the Philippines. And we decided not to.
Yeah, I literally got in at like 9 last night. And I'm leaving again tomorrow in the afternoon. And then, yeah, I'm not going to be home very much over the next month.
Did you know that one of the dictionaries changed the definition of literally to include the way that it gets used now, which means figuratively? So we literally don't
literally do that. Literally. Except I literally did get in.
Yes, I know.
At 9. And I literally have to leave tomorrow. So I'm not being figurative about that.
I understand. But how would I know now?
I am literally being literal.
Gary, you're being disruptive.
And with that,
let's
talk about a couple of news stories before we totally go off the rails, which I have a feeling we just might. Royal Caribbean is looking to end their disruptive last-minute discounts, which is disrupting their brand integrity, and it's confusing. I don't know what's confusing about it. Basically, you wait till the last minute, you get a discount because they want to fill the holes on their ship.
Well, it's not that it's really confusing. It's really that it's hurting their bottom line. They just didn't want to say that. So what they're saying is, we know that you guys have figured out the system, so we're going to change it. We're not going to give you that option anymore.
Yeah, I suppose if someone knows if they are willing to wait until, say, even 30 days, I think is plenty of time for a lot of people. But
right.
What if you could show up, say, the day before a cruise left, and they still had a space available on the ship? Don't you think they would be they would want to fill it?
What they're saying now is we're going to change it. We're not going to fill that space because we think in the long run that we will make as much money or basically make as much money, and also probably that their guests will have a better experience if there's if there's fewer people on the ship. But they're discounting so heavily for those last minute cruises that they're now trying to figure out if it makes sense. I don't know if this is going to stick around. It'll be interesting to see because it depends on what everybody else does. If you can do that last minute cruise on some other line instead of Royal Caribbean, now they control, a fair amount of boats, but we'll see.
It's very difficult for me to plan things a year in advance or longer for cruises. I really struggled. I don't know if we talked about this already, but when the summer happened and I saw both sets of my cousins on either sides of the family, they immediately started booking next summer's family get-together. And that was really difficult for me. And for one of the families where the reservations were a little trickier, I put down the money. And for the other family where I felt like I could have a little bit of leeway and I had some more accommodations options, I didn't put down the money. But I know I'm not the normal person. I know that most people can safely book their travel in advance, but it's very difficult for me.
It depends. Some people really don't know some people don't know if they could ever get time off.
Right.
And then some people had to book it like 18 months ahead. It's really crazy. When I started doing amateur traveler tours or amateur traveler trips, I was surprised how some people like, no, sorry, I can't plan next April because I needed to know that last April. Like,
Isn't that crazy? That's people with serious work schedules, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, some
when,
flight attendants, nurses, and some of those people who have big scheduling systems, sometimes they literally put it in at the beginning of the year. Literally.
So they're probably pretty happy about this. Those last minute, cheap, stingy bastards aren't going to get the that cheaper inside stateroom.
When I did some photo tours, we would often have problems, I think, because it took so long for them to put it into their system that we would sometimes have like 4 months between when the tour was announced and when it would depart. And what I noticed is that a lot of people doing photo tours will often they're announcing their 2018 stuff right now.
Yeah.
So all their 2017 stuff, and you really do need a lot of lead time. It's not, I'm like Jen. I might go to World Travel Market in, say, early November. I have no flights, no hotels or anything booked. And it's a good thing I didn't, because there's a chance now I might not go. So, the fluctuations in my schedule make it that I don't want to plan that far in advance.
But Gary, don't you think at your level of travel, you can get a budget-friendly room in London as needed?
It depends.
Like if you decided to go, you could get that room above the pub, or you could get that chain hotel, or even a hostel.
There are times that you get hit by the really big conference that comes to town. I remember going on hotels.com when I was driving through Reno one time. It's just like, oh, just pick up a hotel room. And there was not a hotel room for an hour's drive away.
Really?
There was some big, I don't know what it was, but it was some big conference. And I never see that. It's very, very rare to run into those sort of things. But if you did, if you tried to be in San Francisco or anywhere near San Francisco, for instance, when the Salesforce conference comes, it just, the Bay Area books up.
And the Bay Area has gotten a lot more expensive too, in general, no matter whatever week you're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Denver this year, and there was some sort of conference, and like in a loft hotel, which normally goes for around $100, maybe a little more, was going for like $350 a night, because this conference had like 14,000 people, and everything in the downtown Denver area was just completely booked, and it just jacked the rates up for everything.
Well, that's like South by Southwest prices, which are just crazy.
A lot of it has to do with the size of the conference and the city. So believe it or not, I've been to World Travel Market in the past, and while that's a very big event, London's a very big city, and so it can absorb quite a bit of that. And it takes a uniquely crazy big event like a CES or something to really, I think, like in Vegas, they could absorb, a lot of conferences with most people not even noting. Right.
Well, they have so many hotels, so many conference centers, it's just huge in terms of total number of beds.
Did somebody say Vegas? Wouldn't it be nice to go to Vegas soon?
Isn't it true that is at the intersection of Las Vegas and Tropicana, whatever the one where the MGM is?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like MGM,
New York.
Yeah, that corner has more hotel rooms than any other city in America.
I could easily believe that the MGM was the biggest if it isn't still the largest hotel in the U.S. And what do you got here? Excalibur, Tropicana, and New York. Yeah.
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 I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Those are huge.
This was something you don't hear about. We might have had a story on this in the past. I don't know if we ever did. But since 2012, the National Transportation Safety Board says there's been 5 aircraft landings. I assume they're talking about like commercial or cargo flights or regularly scheduled things that have landed at wrong airports. And I guess it's not necessarily the pilots, but they're often directed to the wrong place, to like another runway or something else that's kind of in the vicinity.
Right, like a secondary airport or something like that.
Yeah, that seems really weird.
It's pretty crazy, though.
The article says it's air traffic control errors. Everybody's got to have a bad day sometime, right?
Well, the scary one was, Southwest airline flight 4013 took off from Chicago Midway Airport for the 7,000-foot runway at Branson, Missouri. And then, there we go. Thank you for autoplay. But the aircraft with the 124 passengers and 7 crews instead landed at the 3,700-foot runway 6 miles away after being wrongly directed by the air traffic controllers. And then there's a great quote. Visible tire marks showed where the jets stopped on the runway. They basically went to a runway that was half the size of what they were expecting.
How does that happen? Wouldn't the pilot say, that's not where we're going? I'm sure they must have done that flight before, and they would know that, what the airport looked like.
I don't know. Nighttime, possibly?
I don't know.
It's the first time in there. It just seems it seems wrong and weird on so many levels.
Maybe they pretended to have this error, but really it was a conscious choice because of drug smuggling or something nefarious.
No, I'm going to go with, never blame on nefariousness what can be explained by incompetence.
But in a given year, I think there's probably well into the high 6 figures of commercial flights in the U.S., like in the hundreds of thousands of flights.
Oh, yeah.
So, and it averages 1 flight a year that winds up in the wrong runway. So that's not bad. Those are good odds.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they end up at a runway, that helps. Preferably a runway long enough to stop the plane.
I would like to know, I'd like to talk to the pilot that had to take off again from that same runway and how they did it.
Oh, gosh.
I'm sure they didn't have any passengers on board, but I bet they backed it up as far as they could possibly go on that runway. And then they just had to, just gun it on the throttle.
Well, that's one of those things where you get one of those Navy pilots instead of the Air Force pilots. You've heard that theory, haven't you, of how you can tell where your pilot was trained by the landing they do? That those Navy pilots, like to feel the ground. They're used to those carrier landings. And the Air Force pilot is used to having just miles of runway. And so they do a more leisurely approach.
Well, I had a flight when we landed in Anchorage on the way there where I think the pilot probably was trained at the University of Phoenix online. Because it was, I think we bounced a couple times on the way in.
Well, you've done those flights too, like the flights in the islands where it's runway then mountain. Where you really need to get the brakes on in a hurry.
But the thing is, for those small prop planes, they actually do not need a lot of space.
No.
I remember doing a bush plane once in Manitoba, and first of all, we had to dig out the plane because it got stuck in sand. So if you've ever... That's not a good way to start. But I swear to God, it's like we needed 100 feet, and we were just up in the air almost immediately. He could just take off. And it's not like there were mountains we had to worry about. But, when you get those kind of flights, I also landed once on the island of Saba, which has the shortest commercial runway in the world. And I guess the pilots there need special training because basically the end of the runway is a cliff, not a mountain. And occasionally, and if you're listening to this won't work, but if you're watching on YouTube, when the planes go off the runway, occasionally they will drop down out of sight.
Oh, sure.
And then pop back up again a second or two later.
Like planes do off a carrier. If you watch a carrier take off, they'll often descend below the level of the deck as they leave the deck, which is, I imagine, disconcerting if you're not used to that.
Gary, I have a question for you.
Jennifer.
Since you just mentioned a place that I'd never heard of, and
he's making places up all the time.
You can probably rattle off hundreds of places I've never heard of, and that's fine. But I wonder, since you're always on the go and you're always trying new places and finding places that you haven't been to before, do you ever wake up any mornings and just think, oh, I wish I could be here today? Like, do you ever dream about travel that you've already done and just wish you could be there instead of going to the next destination?
Oh, sure. So after TBEX this year in the Philippines, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm not coming back to Minneapolis directly. What I'm doing is I'm going to Fiji. And one of my favorite places in the world are the Yasawa Islands, because I always tell people about this all the time. It's cheap, it's not crowded, it's beautiful. This is where they shot Blue Lagoon and close to where they shot Castaway with Tom Hanks. For $50 a night, you can get a bungalow feet from the beach. I've been very, very close to the beach, and that includes all your meals. And I the first time I was there, I remember having an entire white sand beach to myself. I was the only person that I could see. And yeah, so I'm going back there, not to discover anything new, but I just enjoyed it. And then from there, I'll go do something I haven't. I'll go to Tuvalu, which I've not been to before.
How do you get to that first place that you were talking about?
Oh, basically you fly into Fiji. So there's a direct flight from Los Angeles on Fiji Air. I think that's what it's called now.
Are you flying from Manila to Los Angeles to Fiji, though?
No, I'll be flying probably Manila, Hong Kong, Fiji, or Manila, Sydney, Fiji. One of the two.
Oh, wow. That's still not a great route.
Well,
it's still not a direct route.
Yeah, but there isn't any other real direct route. And then so the international airport is on Nadi, spelled N-A-D-I, but it's pronounced N-A-N-D-I, which is one of the weird quirks of how some things are pronounced in the Pacific. And then there's a chain of islands that goes up the western side of Fiji, and there's a boat that you get at the Nadi Harbor called Awesome Adventures. That's the name of the company. And every day they'll take a trip up and down the chain of islands. And it takes a full day, so it'll leave in the morning around, I want to say 7-ish, gets up to the peak at about 1 noon, and then back down by like 6. And there's like 30 little resorts located on the islands, run for the most part by local villages. And you can get off the boat at any one, and they'll radio ahead, and you can even pay for it on the boat if you want. And they square things up with the resort later on. I use the term resort loosely. Do not expect the Sandals Resort, but all the money stays in the villages for the most part. It's all employed by local people. And it's just one of the best experiences I've had. This will be my 3rd trip there. So I really enjoy it. And then you can get your ticket on the boat can be for however many days you want to do it. I think they have like a 3-day, 5-day, up to a 2-week one where you can do island hopping during that time.
Very cool.
And then I go to Tuvalu, which has been told by the few people I know who've been there, the most boring place on earth. And in James Michener's book, South Pacific, I think it's Tales from the South Pacific, he calls Funafuti the armpit of the Pacific. So I will be able to verify that myself.
Oh, you haven't been to Tuvalu before?
No, it's the only country in the Pacific I've not been to, and that was because of the great passport moistening fiasco of 2007.
I remember hearing that.
I got stuck in the rain, yeah.
That's funny.
And they would not accept a wet passport? What was the story?
Okay, so I was trying to get it to go to Kiribati, spelled Kiribiti. People pronounce it Kiribati, but it's really Kiribati. And again, it's one of these weird pronunciation things. The other being Pongo Pongo in American Samoa, which I'm also going to be visiting. But at the time, Americans needed a visa to go to Kiribati. And there's not a lot of Kiribati embassies anywhere. So I had to go to the one in Fiji. And unlike most countries that put a sticker in your passport, they had a literal rubber stamp with ink and a ballpoint pen they used to fill in the valid dates. And I was in the Solomon Islands and I got caught in the rain and my passport got wet and the ballpoint pen ink bled off the page. And you could still kind of tell it was the rubber stamp was from Kiribati, but there was no dates. And so I arrived in Tarawa, middle of the ocean. I mean, this is not like they can turn you away at the border. And they would not let me in. And really, for the only time while traveling, I really threw a fit. And they were going to send me back to the Solomon Islands. And I said, look, I have a flight out in 4 days. I've already have the ticket. I got my hotel, reservations already made. We can call the embassy to verify that I did this. Nope. They wouldn't let me do anything. So The airport manager witnessed the whole thing. He stepped in. He felt bad for me. He said, well, we got a flight going to Fiji in 6 hours. You can get on that flight if you want. I said, fine. I did that. Sent a nasty email to the Minister of Tourism when I arrived in Fiji. And he forwarded that to the Prime Minister of the country.
What?
And then 3 months later, Americans didn't need a visa to go to Kiribati anymore. So, to anyone listening, if
and
you
to put this in perspective,
Kiribati,
this was your first big trip. This is before people were going out of their way to invite you or things like that.
Oh, yeah. This was, I started in March, and this took place in early August of 2007. So a couple months after I started traveling full time. So, yes, there's no social media, no nothing. I could tell you the name of everybody reading my website because there just weren't many people. But yeah, that was the story behind it. So
you say one of the only time you said the only time you lost your cool while you're traveling. Wasn't there a story with Barbados?
Oh, I kept my cool because I knew how it was going to be resolved. It was a similar thing where they detained me because they have this bizarre rule that nobody knew about. I mean, I later talked to the PR person from Barbados. I went and searched for it online. I looked in Lonely Planet. And the rule is for most countries, you need to have proof of onward journey before you enter.
Right.
Okay.
You have to prove that you're not staying.
Right. So you have to have a ticket out. And I had that. Not a problem. I was going to go to St. Vincent after Barbados. And I had my ticket already booked. And they said, well, where are you going after Barbados? And I said, I'm going to St. Vincent. And they go, after that? I go, Grenada. And they go, after that? I said, well, not that it matters to you, but I'm going to Trinidad. They said, do you have a ticket to the United States? And I go, no, not yet. I'm kind of just going around the region. And evidently the law in Barbados is you must have a ticket to your home country, not just out of the country, which I had never heard of any country ever doing this before. I later went and searched for this, and I did find I had to actually find the PDFs of the laws passed in Barbados where I found this thing listed. And they detained me, and I kind of knew it was going to happen. They kind of let me go. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to put this on Twitter, and I'm going to tag Barbados, and it's going to be a thing. And it kind of did. And yeah, I don't know if they've ever changed the rule or anything on that, though. But it's a dumb rule.
Don't mess with Gary Arndt. Just look him up on Twitter and see who he is, where he's going.
Oh, no, you never say anything like that because, one, you're just going to come across as a dick. You can't.
Too late, Gary. Too late. You already were by the time you were detained.
How? They didn't know anything who I was. I mean, I'm not saying oh, you better not let me go or I'm going to post this on Twitter. You can't do that because that'll just backfire in your face.
Oh, I thought you said that.
I was just quietly keeping to myself, knowing that, all right, once this is resolved one way or the other, I mean, I'm certainly going to talk about it. And it's a crazy rule that no one's ever heard of. And to this day, I've never encountered another country or even anybody that has anything to do with Barbados that ever heard about it.
That reminds me of the story we had of the Frenchman who was destroying road signs in New Zealand as part of a hitchhike hissy fit. He flew into a rage after 4 days of unsuccessfully trying to hitchhike out of a small New Zealand town, and finally just started throwing rocks at people and tore down a sign and yelling at everybody that they were a-holes and lying prone in the road screaming, and he couldn't wait to get back to Europe. I'm sure all of that helped.
This is my favorite part of the article, Chris. 100 people accuse the tourist of acting like a spoiled millennial.
I think if Monty Python were making movies today, this would be like an awesome scene. You stupid Kiwis! I will deface your signs.
It's funny, though, because we just did a show with Jackie Nurse from the Budget Minded Traveler podcast for Amateur Traveler. Recorded it. It's coming up later. And she was talking about people who go down to Argentina, for instance, and just hitchhike around. And I can't imagine you decide you're going to hitchhike and you'd get stuck in a town for 4 days. Basically, for 4 days, no one will pick you up. At that point, you need to admit that hitchhiking is just not a thing here.
I love this quote. You should change the name to Nazi Zealand, not New Zealand. I just came back from Alaska, and I was at the Adventure Travel World Summit, and they always have this thing before the conference where you can go on a trip, and about half the people that attend do it. And I went to Wrangell St. Elias National Park, America's largest national park. It's in Alaska.
Oh, I didn't know it was the largest. Interesting.
Yes, it is. And as we were leaving the park, we stopped and did some photos and everything. Every single roadside sign that we passed had bullet holes in it. Usually multiple bullet holes. And it got to a point where I started looking for the non-shot up sign, and they were very difficult to find. And when we stopped and looked at some of these, most of the signs, the bullets never penetrated the sign. Which then
you mean they didn't go all the way through?
Yeah, they got to have been using a 22 or something. Just kind of strange. There's not a lot of people in Alaska, but they love, or I guess they hate, signs. This other story, this affects you, Jen. The airline Jet2.com, I think it's out of the UK.
I didn't even see
in a groundbreaking / disruptive move, said they will no longer be serving alcohol before 8 a.m. So they want to stop people from being disruptive on flights. So
Gary's making fun of me because I admitted that I don't like the word disruptive. And that's probably because I read so many website app press releases that it just drives me nuts that everybody thinks that theirs is the most unique, most disruptive.
Can you be the most unique?
I find it charming and quaint.
No, but they think
very unique or slightly unique, or
they think they are, Chris. They want to tell you they're the newest and the first and the only.
That's my pet peeve. You can't modify unique. Unique is unique.
Exactly, but I read
more
these
unique.
things.
We're more unique.
No, I think you can be more unique. Look, you could say all humans are unique. We look different. We have different fingerprints, whatever. But then if there's a human that is sprouting wings and purple horns, they are more unique. I think it could be done.
It's very, I don't know. It's just, I think what I don't like when they say that they're the only one doing it, it's just like, I'm not going to print that because how much research would it take to go figure out if you truly, truly are? So frustrating.
With our audience, I don't know how many of you are with what you do. It just, people don't do their homework a lot. So there's a pet peeve among press, writers, new media, all those people in general about a lot of PR people who just don't know what they're doing.
That's because there's zero cost in sending out.
Yep. Yeah, I sometimes just write back. I write about travel. Why did you pitch me?
I'm 50-50. I'm either not going to write back if I get invited to some nail salon opening or some bar opening in a different state that's 3,000 miles away. I often don't reply to those. And every once in a while I'll reply and tell them where I live and what I'm working on.
When I get the press release for the new line of bikinis that are coming out for the spring fashion wear, I usually point out that no one wants to see me. That's really you don't want this. I don't want this. No one wants this.
I haven't even heard of Jet2. Who's Jet2?
Southeast Asia, I want to say.
Have you either of you flown them?
No.
Yeah, they're a discount airline, but I'm just trying to replace them.
Flown on Jetstar, JetBlue.
Oh, I may be thinking of Jetstar.
Jetstar's out of Australia.
Yeah. I think that's who I was thinking of. I will look them up while we go on.
I have a question. Since this episode is so unusual already, since it's just the three of us, I'm going to be in New York next weekend. And I have
London.
What? And I am
UK-based London.
Did I say London? I meant New York. Oh, Jet.
No, Jet2. This was the answer to your question. Delayed.
I was probably dreaming about going to London, but no, I'm going to New York next weekend with Cora. And hit us up on our This Week in Travel Facebook channel and give me some really good breakfast recommendations. I'm in Manhattan. I can't remember where I am. I think it's Lower East Side. I'm staying at my cousin's place. But if any of you have any really, really good breakfast suggestions, let me know.
There is a place in the Upper West Side, but I'll have to Google for it.
I have nothing for you on that one, Jen.
Well, I only got my free time schedule. I mean, I'm going to try and reach out to a friend or one of Cora's friends. Cora actually does have a friend in New York. But we're going over for my cousin's birthday. So I only have Friday morning until about 1 o'clock free for the whole weekend.
Sarah Beth's was the name of the place that I was trying to think of. That's the place where I had breakfast with Alec Baldwin and Timothy Hutton.
What? 2 hotties
They
and
may
Chris?
not remember it. But.
I mean, 3 hotties all at have the same restaurant? Let's see. Okay, so what do you call it? Sarah Betts?
Sarah Beth's.
Betts. Okay.
Get there early, plan on waiting.
All right.
And I will recommend the free bagels at the hotel.
I'm staying at my cousin's apartment, even more free.
So that kind of sort of does it for news.
What?
So
No.
what do we do without
I wanted
a guest?
to do the Indian Hotel. I wanted to do the Indian Hotel one.
What? All right.
I have not been to India, but an Indian hotel booking site introduces relationship mode.
I saw this article, but I didn't know what it meant.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So in some hotels in India, you can't stay as a couple if you don't have a copy of your marriage license. And there are couples who aren't married or don't carry around the copy of their marriage license. And so this is basically a website that solves that problem for travelers. We see that sometimes in the Muslim world as well, where I know I had a guest who they were a couple from Istanbul and they were traveling to the Seychelles for their honeymoon, and they flew through Dubai, and they were not married at the time they were booking, so they had to get all this paperwork that basically said, when we get there and we're staying in the same hotel room, we will be married. So in some countries that are very conservative, you actually need to be able to prove it, especially if you're married and have different last names. That could, cause you problems.
That's me.
Yep.
So if anybody is traveling to India and would like to know about this handy resource, the website's name is Oyo Rooms, OYO rooms.com.
I think we're pretty much talking about hotels that are targeting Indian travelers, probably, but I don't know for sure.
What did I say?
No. You didn't say anything wrong. It's just I don't know if you're staying there as a Westerner and you're booking things on hotels.com or something like that. I don't know for sure if this is going to be an issue you're going to run into, because I'd never heard of it until this article. Mm-hmm. Not in India, at least. That is. I'll be in India in a year and a month.
Chris, you're planning travel that far out?
I'm taking a group.
Oh, is that your next group one?
No, next group one is May in Japan.
Wow.
Where in India? It's a big country.
What country? So in the Rajasthan area. Kind of your first trip to India kind of places.
So Chris, tell us what you do on these group trips. When you take somebody and when you take your group, your amateur traveler listeners, and you've never been to that place before,
I am not the tour guide.
What are your responsibilities as host?
My responsibilities are getting the people, and then I do spend more time trying to make sure that people are having a good time. But basically, we have a tour guide who understands the area, because I couldn't do someplace like that without somebody who really speaks the language, understands the customs, knows the history, those sorts of things.
I really want to do this for family travel, and I was told to go partner with a travel agency in order to do this.
You usually don't need a travel agency. You can go directly to the tour company, to their group tour desk. especially for small group tours that are used to doing tours from 2 to 16 people. If you're doing family travel, you sort of fit in that. So my daughter did a tour in Nepal with Intrepid, for instance, and it was just 2 people and a guide. And so, for family travel, you just contact the group travel desk, and depending on how many people you have, they'll quote you a price that's different from the website. The website is set not knowing the group size that they're going to get, so it's more of an average price. So it can be cheaper if you can guarantee more people.
So do you get interest first?
Yes, I have a private Facebook group, amateurtravel.com/trips, where people join, and that group of people, a lot of them have been with me before, or they're interested in going, and so we talk about, well, what about this place? Well, what about that place? And well, that's kind of expensive for that. And for instance, we were looking at, for a while, one of the options was Myanmar, and interestingly enough, Myanmar and Japan are about the same price. In one, you're obviously going to get a lot more Western facing. You're going to get more polished, let's say, a product than you are in the other. But so, the group said, like, well, for that price, I would rather go to Japan. If I'm going to go to someplace like Myanmar, I'd rather go at Cambodian prices rather than, pay that much. So we have those kind of discussions before I pick the places.
Okay, well, now I'm going to insist, since we just heard about your fantastic trips, I'm going to insist that you tell us how many spots are still available, so that maybe one of our listeners wants to.
Oh, we haven't opened them up yet, so they're all still available.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping to put it up on the website this weekend. So
all right. Do you want to say the price or the time slot that you're traveling, or anything like that?
I don't remember the price for the Japan one off the top of my head, but it's I think it's less than $2,000 for 10 days. I want to say about $1,600, but don't quote me on that. The India one is, I think, 9 days, and it's $690 for land, not counting flights over, and doesn't include all your meals. Mm-hmm. Because those are so expensive in India. So
yeah, Jen, there's a lot of tour companies that offer white label packages.
Absolutely,
so you go to them and just say, I want to book this private tour for this many seats, mm-hmm. and then you can turn around and kind of resell it. And
they'll take the money and do the processing and make sure people have insurance and all of that sort of thing. So going through a travel agent just is a way of adding on 10% more cost.
Okay, so just go straight to the tour provider.
But if you're looking for a tour that's already put together, like, yes, I see you do a tour there and we want to do one just like it. It's very simple. If you want to create a new custom tour, now we talk extras.
I probably don't need that, but what if I can't sell all the tickets?
You pay a different price. So for instance, if we don't get, if we get 8 people to go to India plus me, then as a group leader, the way you usually do is you price it at a certain price. And so at 8 people, mine is paid for, and at 7, it's not. It's partially paid for. And if we get 3 people, then I'm paying a lot more money. I think I lose money. So you
commit to going no matter how many seats you sell.
Yeah, you don't have to put in the final reservation until a certain period of time. I think it's like, I don't remember how many months before, but basically that's the time you're really committing to, we're going to do this trip.
Okay. And have you ever canceled, like on only 3 people signed up?
Yes. I had a tour 4 or 5 years ago. The first time I tried to do it, it was a last minute tour. And I think I only needed 3 people, but it was just too last minute. It was trying to do a trip to Vietnam in like a month. And that was my first indication that people don't plan their lives that way.
Right. Only me. But but that's where you probably hadn't been doing the private group then. And through the private group, you were able to throw some destinations out there and kind of see who hollers before you actually.
Yeah, I think I started doing the private group after the first trip or 2, and that just was a better way to do that. And then we also invite friends along too. So we've had friends and even family come along on these trips because it's not like fun
to go with you. What about you, Gary? Are you doing any trips with G this year?
No.
Oh, really?
No, it was just too much of a pain to do a single departure, so just decided not to. But I'm talking to some other companies about doing some photo tours. Companies that specialize in photo tours. Because I think that'll probably make the process a little easier.
Nice.
Were you doing a custom developed tour? Because that's where a lot of the effort goes.
It was a different departure, but it was the same tour that they kind of already have. It was just the process of kind of getting it out the door was difficult.
That's surprising. The only thing I've run into is, for instance, the tour to Japan was supposed to be in April, and by the time I got my act together and said, "Okay, we're ready to go. Everybody's ready for it," April, they said, "Yeah, no." So about a month ago, they went, "No, you can't. We can't get hotel rooms. We cannot guarantee hotel rooms in April. It's a very busy season with the Cherry Blossom Festival. We could do it in May or June, but we can't do it in April." So I took too long and went into a place where that was a tough season for them to book.
You would think that they would give you deadlines, though. Like if you tell them in advance, okay, I'm thinking about Japan, they would say, okay.
No, I don't know. I don't know for sure that I had told them I was thinking about Japan. We were thinking about a lot of different things. So, and it's also a new person on the group desk that I worked with before. So,
okay.
We did have, you do run into things. We did have the trip to Morocco. Somebody didn't show up with their travel insurance, even though it, apparently was clear to everybody else that you needed to have travel insurance. It wasn't clear to one bozo. It was me, but other than that,
that's why you should get an annual policy.
That's what I have now.
Travel, even a little bit. It's so much more effective to do it that way.
Yeah. With Allianz, right? Don't they have the annual?
That's who I do it with.
I have them.
Full disclosure, I got a business relationship with them, but the reason I do, and then this is something I kind of learned in the process of doing it. There's a lot of travel insurance is one of these things you've probably gotten emails. It's a very competitive SEO term.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of companies that are trying to sell travel insurance, but most of them are not insurance companies. They are resellers of the product, which means that when you actually get the policy, it's not with the company you bought it with. It's with some other company. And that's very important because I believe travel insurance can do a bunch of stuff. So let's say your flight gets canceled or there's a storm and the trip is delayed. There's trip cancellation insurance. A lot of places can just write you the check for whatever that was. But where you really need it for is to get your ass out of trouble if you're injured or you're sick, especially if you're going to places that are maybe not so developed. And what I like about Allianz, and I got to visit their headquarters, is they have a war room where they're keeping track of all the people traveling. And when something happens, they have like 30 offices. Because Allianz is if you ever watch European soccer games, you'll always see and they're a big company. They do more than insurance, but they do a whole bunch of other things. So they're a global company and they got offices all over. So they have staff all over the world on, every continent, I think, except Antarctica, to help get you out of trouble. And that is, to me, I think the real big selling point for using them.
Well, the other thing you talk about getting out of trouble, I think of Dave and Deb, who broke his back in the Amazon, and that's going to be very expensive. But I've run into stories with somebody who I met in Chania in Crete. They had a guest who I think tripped over a curb in Crete, and Crete is a very Western country. The oldest civilization in Europe was from nearby. I mean, they've been civilized for a long, long time. And she tripped over a curb, broke her leg, and I think just getting out of Crete on flights where she had to fly first class, she had to get multiple seats because she had a broken leg that couldn't bend it. It was, I think, $10,000 extra, and that's nothing. That's not getting bubonic plague or something. It's just accidents can happen.
Yeah, and it's like I said, the annual policy. Now, if you're not traveling a lot, you probably just maybe want to do it for the individual trip you're on.
If you get 2 weeks a year that you're traveling, just get it for that.
Yeah, but if you do any of mine, you might even be business travel or something. It's just worth getting an annual policy, and I pay a little over $1 a day. So I think it's 400 something a year. So I think that's pretty reasonable. What else?
Well, we got some picks of the week, don't we? I'm pretty excited about this one site. I'll go first if you want.
Please do.
Have you guys heard of Pangea196.com? Anybody?
I've heard of Pangea.
Anybody? This site, I've probably, well, I can't say all year because I see new sites all the time, but I would say in the past 3 or 4 months, this site has excited me the most. What they're doing is they are arranging for a year of round the world travel for you for digital nomads. So they're providing your accommodations with a kitchen and I think air conditioning and 24-hour Wi-Fi, and they have a whole itinerary for you, and you go with, I don't know how many people they're taking at the same time, but their whole thing is work, travel, live, 196 countries, one world, one life. And so it's a package, experience 12 countries around the world in 12 months.
There was
I don't think someone in PBEX in Sweden who was on, I don't think it was this one, but a different, I think there's multiple ones of these.
There's a few of them doing that.
Yeah.
But I just really liked the one this was putting
She was finding that, it tended to be a younger crowd. It was a remote working crowd.
Right.
And so, you travel together as a cohort from country to country, and there are some activities on the weekends and things like this. I think the one that she was doing was about $10,000, not counting the first airfare, if I want to do that from memory.
I think let me look at the price tag. I haven't looked at it probably in a month, but I want to say it was around $2,000 a month with the initial, it might've been a $5,000 deposit and $2,000 a month for 11 months or something like that. But
and I could be remembering the other price wrong, and it doesn't really matter since I can't remember the name of the place anyways.
Right. Well, what this one does is they pay for your transportation in between the 12 countries, exactly. Not the first and the last.
The first leg, right.
You get accommodations, transport in between, Pangea196.com. You can check it out. The itinerary for the one that they're working on goes from Quito, Ecuador, to Chile, to Argentina, Uruguay, Czech Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, Como, Italy, Phuket, Thailand, Vietnam, China, and Japan.
I don't think it was this company, but there's another company that was doing something similar to this. And it kind of blew up in the face of the people that had signed up for it, where they found themselves kind of stranded because they ran out of money or something like that. So, yeah. Well,
what do you mean they ran out of money?
The company that was supposed to fly them went bankrupt. And so they were stuck. Looking at this list of places, with the exception of maybe, Italy and Japan, most of these are pretty affordable places. And when they give a list of I'm looking at their website, a list of the cost of living comparisons, it's showing Pangea 2000. Then it's like Houston, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, New York. But you're not going to those places. They're going to the places that are cheaper than 2000.
No, they're trying to tell you that 2,000 a month isn't a lot, because if you were living in LA, you'd be spending
right.
2,000.
Well, you're not living in LA. You're going to Bangkok or Quito or these places,
right?
Which are fine places, but
yeah, the thing is, the reason I think it was attractive to the person I was talking to is they did all the arrangements, and if they don't go out of business, that's nice. And also that they're then creating this cohort of people, that they're creating a group of people that you're traveling with and dealing with the co-working spaces and all of that. So for the right person, I think it can be attractive, but it doesn't mean that it's cheaper than doing this on your own.
Right.
Oh no,
And I
it's
think
far
that's
more
what Gary's
expensive.
thinking. You know, it's definitely not going to be as cheap as if you just did this. But on the other hand, you're going to be on your own. So,
But it's really nice to have somebody set everything up for you so that you don't have to go, oh, I wonder if this Wi-Fi is really going to be any good. Like if you're
I see
really
that it's
trying to
a
be
decent option for somebody who
is
they're
starting
just getting
off.
started, right?
Yeah.
It's their first trip, and by the time you do this, you know, and especially if you're actually able to work and pay your way along the way, so now you haven't gotten any further into debt, then you're probably going to be a more seasoned traveler.
But I think you can develop those skills in the first month or two of traveling.
Probably.
And I don't know if I'd want to be stuck with the same people for a year.
I suspect that that's going to be a mixed bag. I think there are some people you would absolutely be lifelong friends with, and there might be the, you know, the odd bird who, oh my gosh, can't we leave him behind?
Right. But you guys probably have those on your tour groups too.
But that's
Right?
2 weeks.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well,
And
you get
that's
lucky.
not a year of, you know, that this is a much longer period of time.
Right. Right.
My thing is, having been traveling as long as I have, and with some extended stays and knowing other people, there are many thousands of people right now who are doing this, who are able to do it just fine. You know, getting a place and buying a ticket is not rocket science. And if those things flummox you.
If Cora were fresh out of college, I would be happy to send her on this so that she could learn in
When
a
she
comfortable
turns 13,
little
you may be happy
bubble.
to send her on anything anyway. So,
In a comfortable little bubble where you can learn to be location independent.
But I think that if I had a travel writer mom like you, I would book her the first month or two, and then she'll get her you know, feet adjusted to being on the road, and then you have to let the little bird fly from the nest. And
I know. She's gonna be well seasoned. I didn't even start traveling until plenty into my adulthood, and I had to start learning, you know, with a lot later. Like I think I must have been, well, I was old, so she already has a lot under her belt already, right? So
how old is she now?
She's going to be turning 8 at Thanksgiving.
So how many countries has she been in now?
12 or 13.
It's not too shabby.
Yeah.
No, I was over 30 by the time I'd been to that many countries. I was looking up a podcast, and I'll look for it here in a second. But I think of the first time that our daughter went off on her own, and I think she had just graduated from high school. And so we flew in together to Germany, and then she went off to Munich, and we went off in a different direction. And, you know, the first time, it's sort of, she was with a friend, so she wasn't by herself. She didn't speak any German, but she was going down to Munich to meet up with somebody who'd been an exchange student, so it was going to be no big deal. Of course, what I didn't know is the very first thing they did was get on the wrong train. So, you know, some of those things you're just kind of glad not to know till later. But
Right. And if you give them enough money, they can fix it.
So my pick this week came about from my story of Barbados. And I'm glad I remembered this, because it's actually a rather clever thing that you might not need this service, but if you do, it's nice. It's called flyonward.com. And what you can do is you can rent an onward ticket for $10. So when you fly into a country and you have to show proof of onward travel, you can have an actual ticket. But the ticket's only good for 48 hours, and then it's refunded. So you can show proof when you enter the country, but you don't have to actually pay for the ticket. And it costs you $10 to have this valid ticket.
there seems like that could be against the rules in some fashion.
If you get a fully refundable ticket,
right,
it's fully refunded. The company buys the ticket, and basically they're just using the $10 then to cover the costs of booking and canceling.
Interesting.
Oh, and they will only book a ticket that departs significantly later after your arrival. So you couldn't say book a ticket that leaves the next day and get a $10 ticket somewhere. It would be a ticket that's like 2 weeks away, and then they cancel it 48 hours later. So that's how it works.
Why would the airlines continue to sell them tickets if they knew they were just buying them and canceling them?
There's probably cancellation fees.
I do not know.
But the
Although it would have to be less
Gary
than
in the
$10.
situation is only paying $10.
Right.
So far, it's working. So, yeah, I don't know why maybe it's part of another, I don't know, they have a travel agency or something, so they're booking actual tickets. And then I don't know how great the demand is for the service. I'm guessing it's quite limited. But I can think of, well, there was one time in particular where I did get nailed because of this, and I was forced to buy a ticket, a refundable ticket, to Los Angeles, and I had to drop like $1,200 on my credit card and then refund it the day after, which was stupid. And this would have solved that problem. So like I said, it's not for everyone. You know, you don't need it in most places, but if you're just kind of want to stay somewhere for an undefined period of time and don't want to have to book your ticket yet because you don't know your future plans, this is an option that is available.
I want to name some other. I want to discourage people from listening to our podcast. No, that's not what I want to do. But there are some other podcasts out there. If you are actually interested in doing what Gary's talking about, the independent travel and learning about that potentially before you go, the one that I just stumbled across was the Chris the Freelancer podcast. That is basically about people who are traveling and working around the world. But there's other ones like Travel Freedom and such, and I'll put links to both those two in the show notes. There's a whole community of people that travel. And I know that there's also a website that is for digital nomads, and it's nomad.com. Is that the one? Gary, do you know which one I'm talking about?
We'll just do a little search right now, Chris, while we are being so resourceful to our listeners.
But basically,
so many
that's not the one.
digital nomad sites and stuff.
I'll save that for a future tip. There's a site though that, for instance, can help you find things like co-working spaces and things like that when you're in Chiang Mai or wherever you're going.
Hey, Chris, I'm just reading the headline, but check this out: nomadlist.com. Best
That's the
cities
one.
to live
Nomad
and
List.
work remotely.
That is the one.
Nice.
That is some fine Googling skills.
Very good.
You know, it's funny because I started traveling full-time in 2007. And this
pre-smartphones and
right, this whole thing really, this digital nomad lifestyle stuff wasn't quite a thing then.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you have a steamer trunk when you started, Gary?
I did, and I had a sedan chair that my servants would take me to the ship on.
Did you have to wear a morning coat all the time?
I didn't have to, but I did.
Well,
choice, because why wouldn't I? Yeah, I mean, Phineas Farnsworth would had a wager, but this wasn't a thing yet, and it had kind of became a thing. It started in like 2010, and I remember there was a group of us in Bangkok, and there was a group of these people that were kind of settling in there. And I remember I went to Chiang Mai before there was this large group, and now there's like this, you know, city within a city of Westerners that live there. And live there and in Vietnam and other places. So yeah, there's a lot of resources for this online. But that's another reason why I find these services weird, is that there are so many resources available to do this on your own. And I think once, you know, there's always that trepidation if you've not traveled much when you start out. But once you get on the ground and you meet people and you talk to them, it all kind of, you learn from them and you figure it out, and that's kind of how you do it. And that's kind of how everyone, I think, goes through it. It's sort of this ritual.
Well, and I think that lifestyle is somewhat easier than the one that we usually are talking to people who are trying to make a living from travel writing. And I think it's easier, for instance, for the people who are doing things like web design remotely or programming remotely or social media management. They're really just doing the same job that they were doing. You know, if you're not a barista, there's a lot of jobs that can still work remotely in a very similar fashion, and there are ways to work yourself into that. And that's some of what these different podcasts are talking about, is that kind of lifestyle.
I never really got into this whole digital nomad lifestyle design thing, because I started doing this because I wanted to travel. And that's still, no, I mean, that's true, because just living somewhere else isn't necessarily traveling. And
no, but for those of us who didn't sell a software company, it's an easier option.
But no, it's still what the reason I wanted to do it is I wanted to, you know, I go to places like Alaska, right? You know, going to the Arctic or these islands, and that does not lend itself to the digital nomad lifestyle where you just want to be in a city. And I've kind of done it. You know, I've stayed in many of these cities. I stayed in Bangkok for a couple months, and many of these top cities, like I'm looking at the nomad list. I've been to all these places, and they're great places, but I don't necessarily think that it's for me.
Well, and I'm doing that lifestyle sort of. It's just that most of the time I'm at home. I'm at home kind of the percentage that I want to be, but I've worked my way into part-time contracting so that I don't have to worry about, 3 weeks vacation a year. In the Philippines in 2 weeks. I'm in Mexico before then. Is definitely what I'm looking for. But you're right, it's very personal. It depends a lot on what you're looking for.
Jen, have you ever thought about taking Cora or your family on like an extended trip for like maybe a year or maybe a couple months?
You know, it's so funny, Gary, because I've gotten asked that question. I would say somebody must have asked me that question 3 or 4 times in the past month. And I think it's an interesting question. She's in 2nd grade right now, just started 2nd grade. And I would like to, but I don't think we've had a long enough discussion on it yet. Myself and John, my husband, we haven't had a long enough discussion on it yet to all be on the same page with that. I would be surprised if she graduates high school and we haven't done it, but everything kind of has to be in alignment and prepared for that a little bit in advance, right?
But I picture you'd be doing it from a well laid out Airstream trailer, though.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, well, I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of. Actually, I don't think I really want to do road schooling. I think me teaching Cora might not be great for our relationship, but I don't know. I'm sure that we will do it at some point, Gary, but it's a little bit early days for that yet. And John's still working, and he's not in a place right now where he could just skip off for a year. But I mean, she's only in 2nd grade. We've got 10 more years. I'd be very surprised if it didn't happen at some point.
Chris, you got a pick for us.
I had a pick. I gave you a pick. I gave you 3 picks. Two podcasts and Nomad List with help from Jen.
All right, then. You got anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I need to skip out.
All right, then. Chris, what's new in the Amateur Traveler this week?
Today's episode was on Qatar, or Qatar, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Excellent. Jen, where can people find you online?
You can find me on the LA Times travel website for my WebBuzz column, and also on yournorthcounty.com, which is a Greater San Diego website. And I had a fun post this week. I looked up 6 really good Airbnbs for people who wanted to do some staycationing in San Diego.
All right. And as usual, you can find me at everything-everywhere.com, where I'm documenting my journey to disruptively visit every national park in the United States. I hope to be done with that sometime in 2017. Till next time, go outside and always remember to be disruptive.